Alright, alright. What's really going on in Bitcoin, cryptocurrency today? Going to be taking a look at Litecoin. Going to be taking a look at some of these key technical aspects of price action moving forward. Going to be assessing some of these pivotal areas of support and resistance I believe we're going to be interacting with in the very near future here. We seem to be breaking downward from my kind of key local support around kind of $177, and so are we bullish enough to kind of come back upward and interact with that kind of range that I was suggesting in a previous analysis, or are we too bearish and we're going to interact with kind of lower support down at like $116 potentially? Let me know in the comments down below. Do you trade, do you hold, or do you let the price action unfold? Let me know what you're doing with your bag. If you have one, do you trade Litecoin, or do you just like, hold through all this crazy sideways and you think we're going to be back at the, $400 level not too long here? Or are we going to come back down to the, sub $100 and, interact with these kind of like lower levels that we've seen, not that long ago, kind of like late last year? Now, jump right into it. Kind of recap price action relative to this kind of ascending trend line that I've had kind of since the kind of end of October of 2020. And we've had prices interacting kind of like above it, looking toward it as support. Then we broke downward kind of at the end of March to interact with that $176 kind of support line, which was resistance back in kind of the beginning of January of this year. And we interacted with it for a few days kind of as resistance, and we broke downward to interact with that $116 level. Ultimately heading toward that ascending kind of trend line and then making its way upward, setting some support and resistance levels kind of between $206 and $227 per Litecoin. We flew through, set some higher highs, interacted with this kind of upper zone above 301 and under 334, setting some kind of like swing highs around like $414. Kind of we were back above my ascending trend line there. We were looking ultimately pretty bullish, but momentum changed very abruptly, and we broke downward through that kind of like 334 to like 301 level, all the way through that lower zone of like 226 and 207 to interact with that $178 resistance, or like what was support, which is now looks to be resistance. And so I was suspecting price action was going to be able to hold along that area, and I suspected we could have traded sideways kind of through that. I did suspect as well some wicks perhaps below. There could very well have been some price action kind of below that trend line. And so, I mean, this definitely, hasn't confirmed, the candle. I didn't want the candle to kind of like daily candle to fully close below my sort of resistance line to confirm it as resistance before I can, suspect that we can interact with these kind of lower levels here. Ultimately, we could perhaps kind of wick up and kind of come back over, but we do seem to be quite bearish at the moment, and so I do suspect perhaps some wicks down to these like $148 levels, perhaps 150 is like a psychological kind of round level I do believe we're likely to interact with in the kind of very near future here. More significant support is going to be found around $115 in my opinion, if we are bearish enough to kind of interact with that level. Some kind of like local resistance I suspected we were going to bounce off of 176 and kind of like 205 to like 225 for a period of time. I suspect that to be a likely range that we're going to interact with eventually, although we are looking quite kind of like short-term bearish at the moment, and we could see some more kind of like bearish targets in the kind of like coming days here. When we consider EngineeringRobo, along with the Fibba Zucchini, Fibba Illuminati, Fibba Bugatti, Fibba lines of sacred symmetry, geometry, and angles, we can see kind of a new perspective come into play. When we consider this 0.382 line kind of just below my 177 resistance is 172. And so that's going to be kind of significant local resistance moving forward. I do believe perhaps that 0.236 line correlating with my $116 support is going to be kind of the the kind of local sort of like a bearish target that we could very well interact with, as prices are below that kind of 200 daily moving average, and we do have the sell for and hell kind of present. The 0.5 Fibonacci line between my 225 and 206 kind of like levels here. We have 218. That's kind of a significant kind of pivot point. I believe we're going to see some resistance off of once we get there. The 0.618 line is going to be a nice level we're going to interact with as we make our way up to my upper zone there. The 0.618 is at $264. It's going to be kind of like a key point I believe we're going to bounce off of and interact with kind of like 218 again to confirm as support before we can see perhaps the 0.786 resistance above like around like kind of like 332 and like the 301 kind of level there. And so we do have a lot of resistance kind of moving forward. Ultimately, this is a very aggressive sell-off, and so with these kind of like current sell suggestions present, I suspect perhaps some kind of like continued sideways, some bearish consolidation and accumulation. This new range I do have is a very crazy zone between that 0.382 line at $172 and the 0.236 line at $115. So we could very well see some some crazy bounces moving forward, and this could take perhaps a couple weeks to perhaps a month if it needs to before we can kind of fully recover and start closing above that 200 daily. When we consider the price of Litecoin against the price of Bitcoin, we can see kind of significant rejection off of 6,700 Satoshi, bringing us all the way down to kind of like below this like zone of slapping, shoving, kicking, punching, munching, and scrunching. We have resistance kind of like off of it, sort of like at the sort of like December of 2020, and then sort of like back in like July of like 2020 as well, like July, August of 2020, we interacted with this kind of zone. We flew all the way through it more recently at the beginning of May of this year, just to get rejected off of that 6,700 line. Like I mentioned, we fell back down through it, interacting with these lower levels that we've seen kind of not too long ago. This 4,500 level, 41.37, and perhaps a ultimately low target of like 37.33. I believe is going to be a range that we could likely see interaction with moving forward. I see local resistance above like 51.24 and under 56.26, in my opinion. Local support, a more bullish support target is going to be that 45.05 Satoshi level. If we bounce between kind of these ranges, that would be some more bullish price action against the price of Bitcoin. Ultimately, I do suspect interaction with that 41.33 line to be a more likely target. When we consider EngineeringRobo, along with the Fibba Illuminati, Fibba Lamborghini lines, we can see a new perspective come into play. When we consider the kind of like how sell 2, sell 3, sell 4, super sell, all these kind of like crazy bearish suggestions against the price of Bitcoin, suggesting some perhaps prolonged kind of like bearish price action against the price of Bitcoin. And so we could see some lows that we haven't that we've seen kind of like not too long ago, but we are still above that 200 daily moving average, and so I mean, price action above that does seem to be still like long-term bullish in my opinion. Even though this sideways could take kind of its time to kind of like to get it make its way through. We have the 0.786 line just below that 200 daily moving average, and between my kind of two support lines there, the 0.786 line is at 42.78 Satoshi, which is just under kind of like 45.09. And just above kind of like 41.42, and so I mean that's going to be a kind of a significant zone that if we're going to see some probably candles interacting with in the very near future. Local resistance is going to be that 0.618 line, correlating with the bottom of my zone at 50.98 Satoshi, 0.5 line near the top of it at 56.71, and so that's going to be a significant range. I believe we're going to have to kind of like fly through and make our way up through before we can interact with like a little pivot point at 0.382, 62.42 Satoshi, and then my resistance at 6,700 again. Ultimately, above this 200 daily moving average against the price of Bitcoin, I could suspect the trend to be bullish long term. But like I said, this could take perhaps like a few weeks to perhaps a month or two to play out sideways before we see these kind of like highs again. When we consider Bitcoin itself against the price of the world, we can see this crazy sell-off. With price action finding its way down to the bottom of this kind of zone here, the 0.5 line at 34K is going to be that kind of like local kind of like bearish kind of support target. More significant resistance at 32K. From the looks of it, we're likely to interact with 32K in the kind of very kind of near future here. We're going to have significant sell pressure off of that 0.618 line, 41K, like 41.5, and that 200 daily moving average at 41,000. So that's going to be significant kind of local resistance moving forward. That's going to be a very volatile multi-$1,000 range that I believe we're going to like make our way sideways through as we determine where like the bottom is in this kind of retracement as the sell-off is kind of playing out. 50% ish kind of correction over the course of like a matter of weeks, from 60K to 30K is very abrupt, I'm sure, for many new investors, and so there's plenty of FUD floating around in the market. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt is making the price action very volatile at the moment. Technically, we are below the 200 daily moving average, which is a technical bearish kind of like is indicator, and then we have the super sell 4, suggesting some very kind of like bearish price action is in our kind of near future. But the ultimate fundamentals, I believe, are bullish enough to kind of like maintain through this volatility, and we could find our way above that 200 daily moving average kind of like sooner than later. If this takes a couple weeks, perhaps a couple months, it very well could. We can have some very volatile sideways for a period of time before we find our way up there. But although ultimately I'm still quite long-term bullish. Like I said, significant kind of bullish support is going to be around that 0.5 line, 34K. If we can hold above there, and the longer we can hold above there, the more short-term bullish we can be, and then the sooner we can interact with these kind of upper levels again, the better. The 0.618 and the 200 daily moving average are going to be significant resistance around like 41,000. 32,000 is going to be some more significant local support. We do have some targets kind of like in the below 32k and in the kind of like 20k range that we could very well interact with as well before we find our way back up to that 0.618, which is not impossible. But although we're looking, we're looking at kind of price action right now, and so far we're looking to see if we can hold that 34k or perhaps 32k. Let me know in the comments down below. Are you bullish? Are you bearish on price action? Do you trade? Do you hold? Or do you let the price action unfold? Let me know your strat moving forward. Are you diamond hands through all this crazy sell-off and panic selling, or are you buying when everybody is fearful to accumulate in the long term? Let me know your strat with your bag if you have one. Thank you for hearing my analysis. Try EngineeringRobo free with the link in the description. Subscribe here on YouTube. Check out all the other social media down below, and tune in for the next one.